By caring for your car, you'll get more satisfaction from driving, and your car will reward you with better performance and fewer breakdowns. And in the long run, it'll save you money.
The car's been with us for over 100 years now, and it's changed our environment and all our lives.
At the turn of the century, the motor car was a curiosity, a rich man's toy, the object of resentment, derision, and sometimes amusement. The sight of a Lanchester being driven up the steps of the Alexandra Palace was considered a huge joke, an occasion for hats to be flung high in the air. Far-sighted individuals realized the potential of the new invention, but it was not until motoring was brought within the grasp of the mass market that its true worth came to be appreciated. As cars became more popular, they started to appear in many guises. They were used for sport, and between the wars, hill climbing was one of the most popular spectacles in Britain. By then, the cars had largely assumed the shapes and the mechanical layouts, which have continued to the present day.
Today, there are around 20 million cars on the roads of Britain, and 28 million people with licenses to drive them. The private car offers one of the great personal freedoms that have evolved this century, the freedom of mobility.
In the engine, there are usually 4 or 6 cylinders. In each one, a piston moves up and down. On the downstroke, the piston sucks in a mixture of petrol and air. As the piston rises, this mixture is compressed, and at the top of the stroke, an electrical spark ignites the mixture. The combustion forces the piston down, giving the engine its motive power. And then, as it rises again, the burnt exhaust gases are expelled, and that's the 4-stroke engine. The pistons are each set at different parts of the cycle to give smoothness, and each connects to the crankshaft, which transmits the power towards the wheels. The engine needs oil for lubrication. The oil reservoir, or sump, is located underneath, and above the cylinders are valves. They open and close at precise times to allow the gases in and out of the engine. They're operated by rocker arms, which in turn are moved by push rods, and the whole mechanism is out of sight under the cam or rocker cover. The mixing of air and fuel and its delivery to the cylinders is performed by the carburettor. It varies the ratio of petrol to air, more petrol when the engine is cold, and the amount of mixture according to the engine's needs. Both the accelerator pedal and the choke connect directly to the carburettor. The ignition system provides the spark to each cylinder at precisely the right moment. It consists of a distributor, a coil, which converts low voltage to high voltage, high-tension leads, and a spark plug for each cylinder. The standard ignition system has a mechanical contact breaker housed in the distributor. The disadvantage is that these wear down and have to be replaced. A modern development is electronic ignition, using an electromagnetic sensor to trigger the coil. Power is transmitted from the engine via the clutch and gearbox. The clutch allows you to start the car, stop it, and change gear by disengaging the power of the engine from the wheels. Otherwise, when you stop the car by braking, the engine would stall. With the clutch pedal down, the engine spins freely. Releasing the clutch pedal forces the clutch plate against the flywheel, and power is transmitted back to the gearbox. Next in line is the gearbox itself. It gives the car flexibility. A low gear delivers a lot of power, but at low speed, for instance when starting off or on a hill. A high gear allows a smooth, fast ride with the engine turning over comfortably. The differential turns the power through 90 degrees in order to drive the wheels. It gears down the speed of the engine rotation, and it also allows the wheels to revolve at different speeds when the car's on a bend. Of course, a front-wheel drive car, which might well have a transverse engine, has the clutch, gearbox and differential all up at the front end. The car is turned by the steering wheel. It's connected to a rack and pinion. A small gear at the end of the steering column engages in a rack which moves the wheels via steering arms. Modern cars have hydraulic brakes. When you press the brake pedal, pressure is transmitted equally via the hydraulic system to each set of brakes. There might be a mixture of drum and disc brakes. At the back, it's likely to be drums. Brake shoes are forced out against the rotating drum. At the front, which takes the brunt of the braking load, it's more likely to be disc brakes. They're more efficient and dissipate heat more effectively. 2 brake pads squeeze the rotating disc. You can't give your car too much love and attention. The better you cosset it, the better it'll look after you.
Where you keep your car obviously depends on your own personal circumstances. You may have to keep your car out on the street. You may be lucky enough to have a drive to keep it in. Or even better, a carport beside your house. Best of all, of course, is a home of its own, a garage.
If you keep it outside, consider a car cover. It'll help to keep it clean and discourage vandals, but don't put the cover on a wet car. That will encourage condensation inside the body shell and cause rust. The carport actually is a very good place to keep a car. It keeps the worst of the weather off the body shell, but it allows the wind to blow through and dry the inside of the panels, and that avoids rust, encouraging condensation.
Of course, a garage is most people's ideal, but all too often it's the most neglected part of the house. It can leak, it can be damp, and there's little or no ventilation. So make sure your garage is watertight and that it has ventilation or an air brick to encourage the circulation of fresh air. All too many people simply shut the garage door on a warm, wet car and leave it to dry. Absolutely ideal conditions for causing rust, especially if you've been out on salted winter roads. If you must put a wet car away, leave the garage doors open.
Washing your car is very important. It keeps you in touch with the car. You look at every inch of it, you spot little nicks and scratches, and then obviously you can touch them up with a paint touch-up pen or an aerosol can. Now, a bucket and sponge is still the traditional and the best way of washing a car. Most people at this point will put a squirt of washing up liquid in the water. Don't. Manufacturers of some brands make their product thick by adding large quantities of salt. So in effect, you're washing the car with a mild salt solution, and that's a recipe for disaster as far as rust goes. Use a car shampoo. Warm water's best, and lots of it. Start at the roof and work down. Use lots of water to float off the grit. Don't grind the grit and grime into the sponge and then scour the paintwork with it. Allow the water to float the dirt off. If you've got one, a hose brush is very useful for just that purpose. Wash carefully around the bumpers, the lips of the sills and the hidden areas. Even though you can't see them, it's most important to get all the dirt well off. Use a big sponge that contains a great deal of water. Don't scrub away at dead insects or stains until they've been thoroughly softened by the warm water and the shampoo. And change that water before you've emptied the bucket. You don't want to wash the grit back onto the car. Rinse carefully with a hose or more buckets of cold water. Next, it's time to dry off the car. Invest in a decent quality chamois leather, the biggest you can find, because they last longer. And draw the water off the big body panels. rinse the chamois out in clean water and wring it often. Every spring, when the frost has finished and there's no danger of any more salt on the road, you should take your car to be pressure washed on the underside to remove salt-encrusted mud deposits. If you don't fancy paying for a steam clean, then do it yourself with a coin-operated pressure washer at a garage forecourt. But make sure you get that lance right underneath and thoroughly blast out all the areas where mud and salt collect.
Every 3 months, give the car a good polish. If it's heavily traffic stained, it might be worth using a car cleaning agent first. But use a hard paint cutter only when the paint is oxidized, dull with no shine. Most modern car polishes go on very easily. And then they polish off to give you a really good shine. Some modern polymer polishes should be treated with caution. They're designed to actually penetrate the paintwork and create a seal, but they can cause odd areas of discoloration, particularly on darker cars. Oh, and don't get them on the glass. There are many good cleaners available for the interior, but do beware of those marketed as vinyl gloss. They leave a rather nasty, unoriginal glossy sheen on the dashboard and the plastic that make the interior of the car look cheap and nasty, rather like a bodged up used car. Spotlessly clean windows and mirrors transform the appearance of a car. They make driving safer and they resist misting. Plastic film builds up on the inside of the windows from the vinyls used on seats and dashboards, which leach out their chemicals in the sunshine. Use proprietary glass cleaners and soft and clean cloths. It sounds obvious to say vacuum the carpets, but a powerful machine will pull out the grit from the pile that wears out carpets.
If you regularly polish your car, then in between you can visit a car wash. But you can choose then the cheap wash cycle. You don't need to bother with the expensive wash and dry polish programs. Of course, a car wash is no real substitute for that personal touch of car care.
Don't forget under the bonnet. Now, steam cleaning a really filthy engine compartment is a job for the specialist, but a regular wipe over the rocker box and the inside of the engine bay with a rag will keep the new look of your car. An aerosol spray engine cleaner will help considerably. A clean engine bay not only makes working on the car easier and more congenial, but of course it also helps you to spot any faults that may be developing, any leaks from hoses or oil leaks from the engine itself. Professional attention to your car is important, and for safety-related items, it's essential. But it is expensive. There's a lot you can do to service and maintain your car.
A lot of people break down because they simply neglect the routine care of their cars. Bob Perkins, as an RAC patrolman, you're on the receiving end of the results of people neglecting car maintenance. Now, what do you think is the problem? Do they simply not bother to take proper care of their cars?
I think on the first instances they don't tend to take enough notice of the car that they've got. They don't read the manufacturer's handbook well enough. So they don't obviously know how to check things properly.
And what sort of faults are you seeing in the breakdowns you meet at the roadside?
Really lack of general maintenance, lack of just basic checking oil and water levels on a regular basis.
Bob's most common call-out is to electrical faults, which again are down to neglect. He finds that drivers don't maintain or replace components. Simple things like loose or corroded battery terminals. Loose wires, dirty leads give poor electrical performance and lead to eventual breakdowns.
What should people do to avoid calling you out?
If only they would take the time for just a small weekly check of their oil levels, water levels, under bonnet, tyres, etc. Just a small weekly check.
Cars don't look after themselves. Every week, just spend a few minutes on simple checks. Check the oil level on the dipstick. It should be between the high and low level. If you top up, use small amounts at a time. Use a funnel so oil does not glug everywhere. Check water levels in the header tank or radiator on older models. Only do it when the engine's cool, never when it's hot. Water should be up to the indicator mark. If you have excessive water loss, tell the garage. Top up with a mixture of antifreeze and water in correct proportions to preserve the strength of your antifreeze. Check hoses for signs of leaks. Squeeze them to see if they're brittle or spongy. If they are, replace them. Don't forget heater hoses. Many modern batteries are maintenance-free, but check the terminals are tight and clean and smear them with petroleum jelly. On older style batteries, check the level. Fluid should cover the plates. Top up with distilled water. Check fan belt tension. No more than ½ an inch movement on the longest part of the belt run. Any wear or cracks, replace. Screen washer bottles should be full. Use an additive in the water. It stops smearing on the screen in bad weather. In winter, use a de-icing additive. Run a cloth over the spark plug tops and leads to keep them clean. Spray all electrics with anti-damp aerosol. Check tyre pressures. Buy a good gauge. Garage gauges are notoriously unreliable. Examine the tyre walls for any bulges or cuts. See a tyre specialist if you find any. Check the tread, no bald patches and lots of tread remaining, at least 2 mm for safety in wet weather. Check all the lights, front and rear, and replace any bulbs that need it. Before any job on the car, handbrake on, gear lever in neutral, ignition off.
Never ever get under a car if it's supported on bricks or lumps of wood. If they crumble, the car will fall down and you will be killed. Only ever get under a car when it's supported on axle stands or proper wheel ramps and they're on a hard surface. Never get under a car when it's lifted by a jack. Under the bonnet, don't wear a tie. You'll only tangle it in the fan belt once. Don't wear a wristwatch. And don't wear any rings that might catch inside the engine compartment. And if you're working under the bonnet with tools, don't put them down on the battery. If you do, you could short out the terminals. It might cause an explosion and give you a very nasty burn. And finally, of course, when you're working under the bonnet, never smoke. Cars obviously need servicing. Unless you're an expert, leave the major repairs to the specialists, especially when it comes to safety-related items. Lots of people, however, can do routine maintenance themselves. If you've got a brand new car, you don't have a lot of choice. If you want your warranty to stand up, you have to stay within the dealer network. But once out of warranty, the franchised main dealer may be too expensive.
So you'll be doing jobs like oil changes, your own filter changes, plug changes, hose and fan belt checks and replacements, changing the points and adjusting the timing, replacing the air filter, and cleaning the carburettor. Before you start, it's well worth investing in a manual for your car, even if you don't contemplate the major mechanical repairs they cover. You'll need a basic toolkit, a set of screwdrivers. A set of spanners, both open-ended and ring, are useful. A socket set makes life a lot easier, and you can start with a small set and expand later. Buy good quality, not cheap Far Eastern products. A plug spanner, a pair of pliers, and a hammer. Your driver's handbook should list the jobs you need to do at a typical 5,000-mile service.
Let's pick 4 of those jobs and see just how easy they are to do. You'll need a spanner for the drain plug, a strap wrench to grip the filter, a container for the old oil, a plastic can with the side cut out is a good idea, the new filter and fresh oil of the right grade. If you need to raise the car, remember, proper ramps or stands. Run the engine for a couple of minutes to get the oil warm, but not so hot that it could burn you, and then switch off. Take off the oil filler cap on top of the engine. Loosen the drain plug to the last few threads. Slide the container under to catch the oil. Remove the plug and let the old oil gush out. Keep the sump plug clean, put it to one side. Leave it to drain for at least 5 minutes until it stops trickling. Most modern cars have a disposable cartridge filter. Grip the filter with the strap wrench and it should undo quite easily. Loosen the cartridge and try and catch those drips in a tray or a newspaper. Remove the cartridge and clean up the sealing face. Make sure the old sealing ring comes away. And make sure the new cartridge has its sealing ring in place. Screw it on finger tight and then tighten it a quarter of a turn or follow the instructions in your driver's manual. Replace the drain plug and tighten it firmly, not forgetting the washer. Don't over-tighten. Pour in the new oil slowly so it doesn't spill all over the side of the block. Don't pour all the oil in. Keep at least a pint back from the recommended quantity. Wait for the oil to settle and then fire the car up and run it at a fast idle for a minute or 2. Switch off, let the oil settle again and check the dipstick. And then use the oil you've left to top up to the full mark on the dipstick. Check the oil filter and the drain plug for any sign of leaks. And don't dispose of the old oil down drains. It's illegal and very antisocial. Take it to your local dump that should have a collection tank for old engine oil.
You'll need a plug spanner, an old paintbrush, a set of feeler gauges, and of course a new set of plugs.
Check that the handbrake's on, the ignition's off, and the car's in neutral. And now for the plugs.
Replace one plug at a time. This will prevent you mixing up the high tension leads. But it's a good idea to mark them individually anyway. Pull off the lead at the connector or the plug cap, not the wire. Unscrew the plug with your plug spanner, taking care to keep it in line with the plug. Just before the plug comes to the top of its threads, clean up the area around the seat with an old brush. And blow away any debris so that nothing falls down the hole and into the engine. Check that the gap of the new plug is correct and close up the gap if necessary. Place the new plug in the hole and feel with your fingers for it to take up the thread. It's easy to cross-thread plugs, and if you wind a cross-threaded plug home with a spanner and lots of muscle, you could damage the head.
Plugs are so cheap it's really not worth cleaning the old ones. Always buy a new set.
You'll need 2 spanners and a wooden lever. You could use the wooden handle of a hammer. If your fan belt is slack, that's more than half an inch of play on the longest run, you must tighten it or it'll slip and the car's cooling and electrical systems could be affected. To do that, loosen both the nuts below the alternator and the nut on the adjustment slide. Put in a wooden lever between the alternator and the engine to avoid any damage and ease back to take up the slack on the belt. Tighten that top nut on the adjuster slide. Release your wooden lever and check the fan belt for tension. It should only give half an inch of movement on its longest run. Tighten both the bottom nuts, and of course, if the belt's worn or cracked, you need to replace it using this procedure. And if you put a new belt on, recheck the tension after a week's use. You'll need a screwdriver, emery cloth, new hose, new circlips, a filler can, antifreeze, measuring jug, and the garden hose. First, you need to drain the system. Undo the drain tap at the base of the radiator. If your car hasn't got a tap, undo the bottom hose gently. Don't make a mess. Collect the coolant in a suitable container. To ensure clearing the whole system, make sure the heater control is set to hot. Loosen the screws on the clips holding on the top hose. Remove the old damaged hose. It could be very stiff, so don't just keep tugging away at it. You could damage the neck. Twist off the hose rather than pulling at it. If you've got a garden hose, stick one end into the neck and run water at high pressure through the system for a few minutes. This will flush out any loose, corrosive material that may have settled in the cooling system. Swap the hose over and backflush the system in the other direction. Close the drain plug or refit the bottom hose after the water is drained away. Clean up the corroded neck with emery paper or a wire brush. Slide the new clips on the hose and fit it in position. Slide the clips over and tighten them, but don't crush the new hose. Check your handbook for the capacity of your cooling system. Part fill the cooling system with clean cold water, then measure out the correct quantity of antifreeze. Add it through the header tank cap, and then finally top up to the mark on the expansion tank with clean water. Run the engine for half a minute to see if the level drops. If it does, top up to the mark and check all the joints you've been working on for leaks.
A flat tyre is a nightmare prospect for many people who just don't know how to change a wheel. If you get a puncture, move the car to a safe place, off the road if possible, and right to the far edge of the hard shoulder if you're on a motorway. Put on hazard warning lights. Park if possible on the level. Apply the handbrake hard and put the car into gear. First, prise off the hubcap, and then loosen the bolts or nuts. If they are too tight for you to shift with the wheel brace supplied, try standing on it. If they still don't move, extend the length of the lever. Use the jack over the end of the wheel brace. When the bolts are loosened, place the jack in the position indicated in your car handbook. Raise the car. Not just enough for the flat tyre to clear the ground, you will need extra height for the fully inflated spare. Undo the bolts, wheel brace first, then fingers, and put the bolts in a safe place so they don't roll away. Take off the punctured wheel and put it in your boot. Bring on your spare. It's heavy to lift, so hang it on the centre of the wheel first, or locate it on one stud if the wheel has locating studs, and then rotate it into position. Do all the bolts up finger tight, and then gently with the wheel brace. Lower the car, and now with the wheel firmly on the ground, finally tighten up the bolts with the brace. It's not necessary to put the hubcap back on. If it's awkward, leave it till later. That wasn't so bad, was it? Be prepared for breakdowns. Carry an emergency windscreen, damp start aerosol, spare fan belt, and fuses, a tow rope, a petrol can, a torch, some adhesive tape, and some garden wire. A comprehensive breakdown kit like this will help get you out of trouble.
If you're going abroad, it's a good idea to hire the RAC breakdown kit. Before the MOT test, give your car a quick check over yourself. Failures can often be on avoidable, trivial items. Make sure all your lights, front and rear, are working properly and the headlamps are adjusted. See your shock absorbers are not leaking. Make sure the brake pedal is firm and that the handbrake is properly adjusted. Make sure the seat belts aren't frayed and they're working properly. The exhaust system's not leaking. The windscreen wipers work and their rubbers are in good condition. And the washers are working. Check the horns blowing. Check that all the tyres, including the spare, have got legal tread. In wet weather especially, you must have at least 2 millimetres of tread to ensure adequate road holding. Check around the sidewalls for any bumps or cuts. If you detect any, see a tyre specialist. If the test centre find a mechanical or structural fault, fair enough, but do these basic checks and you shouldn't fail on a trivial item. Don't forget, check when your current MOT expires. You won't be sent a reminder in the post, and it's illegal to drive a car over 3 years old without the MOT certificate.
RAC figures show that the cost of running a family car is something like 30 to 35 pence per mile. The costs mount up like this: road tax, depreciation, insurance, finance charges, petrol, oil, tyres, servicing, maintenance and parts, and passing the MOT. Of those, road tax is the only fixed cost.
One of the best ways of saving money is through driving technique. Now that might sound blindingly obvious, but many people simply don't realise the difference that driving technique makes to a car. If you take off a line like this with the wheels spinning at maximum revs, you race the car up to its maximum speed in every gear, and then you scream up to a roundabout, for instance, and brake fiercely for the roundabout, you'll be lucky to see 22 or even 23 miles to the gallon out of this car. Alternatively, by simply using the throttle gently, by planning ahead, by using the brakes intelligently and early, and conserving the car's momentum, you'll see easily 40 miles to the gallon out of an Escort like this. Experiment with the car and find the earliest point at which you can push the choke home after you've started up. The sooner you get the choke back to its setting, the more economical the car will be. Don't accelerate hard up inclines. Let the car take its own rate up the hill, and once you're over the top, then allow the gradient to aid you and to build up momentum again.
Other ways to improve your fuel consumption: don't carry unnecessary junk in the boot. Use a roof rack only when necessary. Avoid driving with too many car windows open. Ensure your tyres are at the right pressure.
Are you paying too much for your insurance? It doesn't necessarily pay to stay with the same company forever. Shop around for a better deal, especially if you've got a good record. Check with occupational deals, makers' special discounts, owners' clubs arrangements. Take the Institute of Advanced Motorist test, because if you pass, you can get a discount. Limit your cover to your needs and specified drivers. And if your car's getting old and tired, well, consider third-party fire and theft instead of comprehensive insurance.
When it's time to fill up, keep your eyes open for bargains on the road. Petrol prices do vary considerably. Engine oil. Buy it in bulk and do your own oil changes. You can save a great deal. With tyres, buy the best. There are a lot of special offers and discounts around. To avoid uneven wear, have the tracking, suspension and wheel balance checked regularly, and check tyre pressures weekly. Your tyres will last much longer.
So you want to buy a car. Well, before you start, make sure you know what you need, how many people you might need to carry. Do you need the power to tow a caravan or a trailer? What sort of luggage space do you want? A hatchback? An estate? Or the security of a boot? Will you be taking long or short journeys? Get all those criteria down on paper and a picture of the sort of car you want will emerge. Obviously, if you don't have the cash to buy your car outright, an interest-free loan is one of the cheapest ways of raising money. Consider cheap hire purchase deals from dealers or loans from banks. From whatever source, make sure you're certain of exactly how much money, including interest, you'll have to pay.
The major decision in car buying is shiny and new or second-hand. If you buy new, you get the manufacturer's warranty for the first 12 months or 12,000 miles, and some manufacturers offer much longer. If you buy used, you take advantage of the depreciation on a new car. That's the amount of money it loses from the day it's registered. And by doing that, you often buy an awful lot more car for your money.
New or used, the amount a car will cost you to run obviously affects your choice. But the one factor you really must get right is depreciation. Just look at these figures. Two similar types of car, one from manufacturer A, the other from manufacturer B. They're both popular 1.5 litre models and both cost £6,000 new. But when you come to sell these cars, having covered about 10,000 miles in the first year, you might get £4,500 for one car and only £3,000 for the other. That's £1,500 difference in the loss you could suffer. And expressed as a running cost, it's 15p per mile or £29 per week. And against that sort of money, differences in fuel costs and insurance pale into insignificance. So if you're buying new or used, look at the published guides to see how well your choice maintains its value. Diesel cars are now well worth considering. They give good fuel consumption, performance is now very good, and small diesel cars are very popular second-hand.
It's a buyer's market for new cars, so if a dealer doesn't do everything he can to satisfy you and sell you the car of your choice, walk away. There are plenty of others who will treat you right. You should be able to negotiate a deal that involves a discount as well as a good trade-in offer on your old car. Shop around. Don't take the first offer.
You can save hundreds of pounds with just a telephone call. When you've narrowed down your choice to 3 or 4 models, then go out and try examples of each from various dealers, so that you can get a feel for the car and how it fits you and your lifestyle. Don't let the salesman just take you for a ride around the block. Make an appointment and go for a decent drive. You want to travel on minor roads, major roads, and if possible a motorway, and urban roads. Only then will you get a true impression of the car.
Buying second-hand can, of course, be a very different experience. There's one golden rule. Don't buy on model, don't buy on mileage, buy on condition. And that's a rule that applies right across the price spectrum, from an old banger of an Austin Cambridge right up to a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Now, there's 5 main areas where you can buy a used car. The main franchise dealer. He's out there to sell high-quality used cars with low mileage. He'll offer a good warranty, and the cars are right up at the top end of the used car price band. Specialist dealers have a very good knowledge of the type of cars they sell. They've got a reputation to protect. But often you have to travel quite some distance to find them, and that means you'd have to travel back if you've got a problem. Used car dealers. Always look for membership of the Motor Agents Association and make sure the dealer's operating the used car code of practice. Be careful. Stick to dealers with good local reputations and you won't go too far wrong. Next, auctions. Clearly, you really can pick up a bargain because that's where the trade buy their stock. But you must know what you're doing. There's very limited protection for the private buyer at the auction. Buying a car privately offers no protection for the buyer. You must beware of sharks who pose as private sellers but are in fact backstreet traders. You can get excellent deals in the private sector, but beware. From whatever source, a used car backed up by an independent engineer or organisation's inspection and report is well worth looking at. A cool view of the car, ignoring the dealer's blandishments, is an added guide to its value and likely performance. If you don't know too much about used cars, always take an expert along with you. And if you've any doubts, ask for a qualified engineer's report. Now with me is Norman Levinson, one of the RAC's vehicle inspectors. Norman, on the face of it, quite a nice clean W registration Cortina there.
Yes, initially quite presentable, but looks a bit suspect down in this bottom corner of the door here. There's rust breaking through there.
The door
it's
doesn't
not
fit,
fitting
does it?
correctly,
No.
no. Let's see if there's any metalwork there. This
Nope.
is a magnet which actually tests the thickness of the paint, and as you can see, the magnet isn't doing anything, so I suspect that's body filler in there.
This is the magic plastic paste down
That's
here,
right.
is it?
Oh, what have we got up here? Some overspray on the door handle. Another telltale sign that it's had paint work done on it.
Norman's eagle eye also spotted some serious rust around the door jambs, shallow dents, further paint overspray, and under the wheel arches, rust that could well have extended into the body shell itself. Replacing rusty body components is a very expensive business. Step back from the car, see if the wheels are in line, have a look along the body panels from the side. A view like this will often show up ripples and repairs that a side-on view won't reveal. Stand well back and see how the car sits on the road. He then gave this Mini the once-over. Under the bonnet he found a dirty engine bay, spark plugs which had obviously not been changed, a frayed fan belt, and a loose coil. It all presented a picture of neglected maintenance and lack of servicing. But there were no signs of accident damage. Oh, and the oil?
Oh dear, we're below the minimum mark here. Let's have a look inside the car, shall we? The important thing inside the car is under the mat area. On this particular car, the jack has been incorrectly positioned and it's pushed the floor up there.
Is that serious?
Not really, but it really wants straightening up.
Of course, rust could get in underneath us.
That's right, yes. These panels along here do rust, and that can cause MOT failure. Moving along to the back, again, the floor area, in this case, is in good condition. The deadening material is still intact.
So you'd always advise pulling up the carpets?
Oh, yes, yes. You get water trapped underneath them, and that can start rust off.
Not a bad little car on the face of it.
No, not too bad at all.
So what should people look for when they go to inspect a used car?
Well, first of all, they should decide very carefully what they want in a car. But mainly, it's close observation, really, more than anything else.
Use your eyes?
Use your eyes, yeah.
And don't be rushed?
No, don't be rushed. Take your time over picking and choosing. It's going to be the second largest purchase most people are going to make in their lives, so they shouldn't really be rushed into it at all.
Whenever you go to buy a used car, you must go for a test drive. And I don't mean just a quick flip round the block. You go for a proper drive, so you get the car thoroughly warmed up and you get to know every little nuance of it. Don't just drive on smooth roads. Find some bumpy surfaces, listen for rattles, crashes or strange vibrations, and feel if there are any odd judders through the steering wheel. It can all indicate worn dampers, suspension mountings or steering joints. Now it's very important that you listen carefully to the gearbox in each ratio. In first gear, when you accelerate away and you lift off, does the car jump out of gear? If it does, it's a sure sign that the synchromesh is worn, and that could be a very expensive problem for you. Do the same thing in second gear, again, listening to the noise of the engine and lift off. Any sign of the gear lever kicking or jumping out of gear, be warned. Use your ears. Listen for whirring or whining noises that rise and fall in relation to the speed of the car, not the speed of the engine. It could indicate worn wheel bearings or even a back axle on the way out. At speed, does the car pull to one side? That could be just tracking adjustment out, but more seriously, it could indicate previous crash damage. Back at base after the run, open the bonnet and listen to the engine. Any deep thudding noises or strange taps from the little ends, perhaps. Suspect any regular knockings or rattle from a timing chain or a valve gear. It's acceptable as long as it's not excessive. This car produces a huge cloud of smoke when you rev up, and that obviously means engine wear, and this particular Cavalier isn't for me.
Before parting with your money, check the seller owns or is entitled to sell the car. Check the logbook. That's the vehicle registration document. It's not proof of ownership, so ask to see a bill of sale or receipt, or any service records. And check mileages on any MOT certificates. If you are purchasing the car privately, when you make the appointment to see it, ask if it's at the address shown on the registration document. As a further safeguard, check that the vehicle's engine and chassis numbers, which you will find under the bonnet, match those shown on the vehicle registration document. If you are in any doubt about the vehicle's ownership, do not proceed with the purchase. You can check through the Citizens Advice Bureau if the car has outstanding HP debts or if it's been written off by an insurance company. If you find after the sale there are any problems about ownership, seek legal advice quickly. Try the RAC Legal Service.
You may think it's more trouble to sell the car yourself, but that way you'll make the most money. Get the car into condition for sale. A scruffy, uncared-for car is worth £200 or even £300 less than a clean, polished car, even if all other factors are common. And that's where all the care for your car pays off. It makes a lot of sense to take it to a professional valet. It's certainly worthwhile in terms of the extra you'll get for the car. When you come to draw up an advertisement for your car, try and make it stand out from the rest, but don't make inflated claims you can't substantiate. Try and get across the care that's gone into your car. Don't forget the golden rules. Obviously, you need to mention the make of car, the model, the year, the mileage, the colour, the price, and where you can be got hold of. Check your insurance covers people to drive the car on a test run. Don't let people go off on their own for a test drive, no matter how plausible they might appear. You never know, you might not see that car again. And don't let the car out of your hands till you've seen the money and counted it, or until the bank has positively confirmed that the cheque has cleared and the money is in your account. The accessory business has become a multi-million-pound market, and there's now a bewildering array of items you can fit to your car to improve its safety, its convenience and its appearance. One of the most effective ways of changing the appearance of your car is to fit light alloy wheels like these. But of course, these wheels aren't just about appearance. They're much lighter than the steel wheel. They're probably going to be truer because, believe it or not, it's very difficult to make a pressed steel wheel truly round, and they're much easier to balance. They also aid brake cooling, and they reduce the unsprung weight on the end of the axle, and that means you get a smoother ride, and the springs and dampers keep the wheels pressed onto the road all the time. If you're going to invest quite a lot of money in a set of these wheels, you also need, of course, security wheel lock nuts, and they make sure that only you can take the wheel off. Years ago, we used to make our Minis go at least 10 miles an hour faster by putting a strip of checkered tape up the centre of the bonnet and over the top of the roof. From those humble beginnings, we've now got a £1 million market in stick-on stripes, and it's not just stripes. You're into designer graphics for all areas of the car. There's millions of Ford Escorts on the road, but you can make yours look very different to all the rest with the addition of a front spoiler, side skirts and rear skirts too. Be warned though, items like these are sometimes very difficult to fit, and it can be tricky to match paint and finish. If you've got a baby or a young child, you should obviously never travel with it unrestrained in a car. There's a wide range of baby seats on the market. Choose carefully and pay for quality. If you fit a baby seat or a carry-cot restraint system yourself, read the instructions carefully and pay particular attention to the mounting points. Now, if you've got an estate car or a hatchback, there's often a problem with a baby seat. You can't attach a baby seat to a folding backrest. Consider one of these retaining bars. They snap into place and you attach the baby seat to them. They're very secure, but if you need to use the load space of the hatchback or the estate, you can take them out. If your car doesn't have them, consider fitting rear seat belts. Their safety value is undisputed and they do save lives. Items well worth carrying in the car include a warning triangle. If you break down round a blind corner, it's a lifesaver to put up a warning for other drivers. Obviously, a first aid kit. You never know when that's going to come in useful. And mount in the car a fire extinguisher. You often find you use up your fire extinguisher on other people's fires, but you never know when it's going to come in useful. There's obviously a vast range of in-car entertainment equipment on offer for your car. You can pay £30 for a simple radio, and at the top end, the sky's the limit. Bear in mind, even the most sophisticated in-car unit isn't going to sound the same as it would in your living room. A speeding car is a pretty noisy place. And installation can be tricky too, unless you're very skilled at electrical DIY. It's silly to spend an awful lot of money on in-car stereo and then spoil it through a poor installation. It may be better to go to an expert. A factory-fitted glass sliding roof is one of the most popular options on new cars. Of course, people who've bought a car without one often like to have one fitted. There are DIY kits available on the market, but the degree of expertise needed to fit a sunroof to a car is beyond the capability of the average DIY enthusiast. They're not really to be recommended. And finally, the one essential item every well-equipped car should have, you really must make it smell nice.
So there we are. Care for your car and it'll care for you, providing you with thousands of miles of fun and service.
If you neglect it, it's going to bite you back, and you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to choose to do it on a dark, wet night when you're miles from anywhere. Of course, if you're a member of the RAC, they'll be happy to come and pick you up.
But you can save yourself a great deal of time, trouble and inconvenience by lavishing just that little bit of extra love and attention on your car.